Thank you, Presiding Officer. Let me just posit an approach to how we might deal with the issue that's before us. We should describe the problem. We should obtain the information about it. We should extract data that's meaningful. We should normalise the data across the timeline that it's spread. From that, we should identify solutions. We should then compare the identified solutions with each other and select solutions that we take forward, find the finance and implement, and then we should start again, because it's unlikely that one time round the loop will solve the problem. And I think one of the things that comes out of the debate is that in our describing the solutions, there actually is comparatively little difference between us across the chamber. We accept that there is a challenge before us, and that this challenge will be one which will endure over the long term, but which we must make some progress with. Now, obtaining information. I think we're not doing quite so well there. We've got a table from Dr. Jim Scott's research, but there is no context. Yes.
Joanne Lamont.
How many times in the last 8 years that finding data, interrogating and finding solutions has already been done? Because the point is not to diss the evidence that somebody has presented, but accept there is a problem and whether we're spending the money on the right things or not. And I am concerned. It seems particularly the backbenchers, rather than a Cabinet Secretary, who want to close down a debate, have an argument about the evidence, rather than agreeing there is a problem and coming to agreement what the solutions might be.
Stewart Stevenson.
It would be helpful if the member actually listened to what I had said, Presiding Officer, because I acknowledged the challenge that is before us, and I do so again for the hard of hearing, if there are any who thus described are present now. Now, to return to Dr. Scott's such extract from the data as there is, in and of itself it tells me almost nothing. And the reason it tells me nothing is because it fails a number of the tests I've described. It is data, I accept that. It has a timeline. I have no knowledge of what normalisation has been done between the different parts of the timeline so that it is proper to compare one year to another. It does. I'll make a little progress, but I may come back. I also have no information about the sources of each element of data that is on this single sheet of paper. An academic, one moment please, an academic paper would normally have that information. And I expect that the whole paper probably does. But I think I just say gently to my colleagues on the left of the chamber that it generally be helpful to their cause and to good debate if we had had the whole paper. Forgive me, I will take Mr Finlay first.
Neil Finlay.
It's abundantly clear that neither Dr Scott nor anyone else in this chamber is on the same intellectual wavelength as Mr Stevenson, but that comes as no surprise to any of us. So maybe he could tell us, in his wisdom, what the problems are in Scottish education, because we will all sit here absolutely rapt at his intelligence.
Stewart Stevenson.
I'm conscious of the fact I have 6 minutes, but I also, while accepting plaudits, which are entirely due to the genetic inheritance from my parents, perhaps more than my own efforts, that the real point that we all have to engage in, let's make common cause about getting the whole picture in front of us so we can pick out the bits and start to agree the bits we want to prioritise. Now, the Labour Party's motion before us does move to solutions. It, for example, talks about 10 new literacy teachers and doubling the number of teaching assistants in associated primary schools for 20 schools facing the greatest challenge. Now, I can't possibly rebut that as a proposal, because I don't have any of the workings as to how we've arrived at that as the magic bullet. By the way, it might be the correct answer. I don't reject it because it's come from the benches opposite, but neither can I accept it because I have no workings. So I don't know what the axioms upon which it was based. I don't know what the inbuilt assumptions. I don't know even what the policy objectives in any detail were. But let me also turn to the underlying numbers behind the Labour Party's proposal. In an earlier part of the debate, I simply asked, how much a teaching assistant would cost to employ and how much a literacy teacher. I got a fairly definite 20,000 for the former, a less certain response on the latter. Yes, I will.
Perhaps Mr Stevenson will excuse the memory of an older man. The correct figures are £36,705 for the literacy specialist, £14,880 for a teaching assistant, and that includes NI and pension payments.
Stewart Stevenson.
Well, can I say, that is excellent. We will go away, and I will certainly have a look at it. I'm sure colleagues will equally do. But it would, and I say gently, it would be helpful to have this sort of thing before the debate, rather than when the last backbench speaker, and I did ask for it early in the debate. Now, Presiding Officer, I'm in my last 45 seconds. Just let me illustrate how numbers can mislead. There's an article in the Financial Times today saying productivity in the UK is falling, and that's a good thing. And the reason is they're filling some of the relatively low-skilled jobs that have been difficult to fill in places like London. That's helping the overall economy, even though the productivity is going down because these jobs are being filled. An example of how numbers can confuse without explanation and discussion. Let's have it, please. Presiding Officer.